Welcome back, gang. It's Deltia from Deltiasgaming.com here with a Black Myth Wukong video. And in this video, I'm going to give you a rundown of various beginner strategies and tips for increasing your power, progression, and understanding what to focus on in this game. Timestamps are below if you want to skip ahead, but you shouldn't. And if you get something out of this video, do me a big favor, hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and let's get started. So the first form of advancement in Black Myth Wukong is level. Leveling is done by, well, killing things and or bosses, just like every other RPG exploration game. The thing that happens when you level up is you obtain what's called a spark. It's just an interesting mechanic that represents talent points. So sparks are used to obtain new skills and or talents in the self-advancement tab. Black Myth Wukong features a whopping 6 skill trees, each with many options to pick from, and it can get overwhelming. You gain sparks by leveling up in meditation spots. Meditation spots are essentially secret areas where you can meditate once and gain a spark permanently. At around level 71, I have 82 sparks to give you an idea of how this looks. And once you gain a spark, you can slot it in a various skill slot that you want, and you can reset it at any time at the Keeper Shrine. Thus, you can experiment with various builds, talents, and upgrades. The biggest tip I want to give you regarding sparks and talents is spending them to increase your focus points. Focus points are vital for almost every aspect of combat in this game, and a core element to what you need to progress, especially immediately early on. So if you go to the stance tree, you want to spend sparks in either stance or the focus talents on the left-hand side. Once you've reached various thresholds, you'll gain an additional focus point. You'll see this focus point represented in your UI by little dots. This is really core to combat, especially doing damage and combos. Some of the skills and heavy attacks scale in the amount of damage they do based on how many focus points you spend. So if you're charging and holding them up, or you're building focus through combat just by dealing damage, you unload it with a powerful heavy attack for maximum burst potential. So primarily, save your sparks, focus on this. Next up, we're going to talk about skills to unlock. Again, with 6 talent trees, you kind of don't know where to go, what to spend talents on. So early in the game, don't overthink and get complicated with your build. Passive bonuses are typically the best. So anything that increases stamina recovery, or reduces dodge cost. You want to survive predominantly. You can always do damage no matter how much you hit like a noodle. If you survive, the boss will go down. At level 5, you can access the pillar stance, and at level 20, you can access the thrust stance. I recommend spending a point there when they become available to give you more flexibility in combat. Stances essentially allow you to change how your heavy attack and or your talents work. Briefly touching on them, smash stance is mobile, pillar stance gives you a high up perched view, and thrust stance give you a little bit more range. So it's worth spending 1 talent on pillar stance and thrust stance, and spending the bulk in your majority on smash stance until you hit much later levels. Now, when we talk about the survival skill tree in the foundation, this is much better at higher levels beyond level 45, where stamina is available right away and has a lot of heavy unlocks to lower the stamina cost of dodge or increase your survivability in general. Same with the first 2 talents in the survivability skill. Don't sleep on these. Also, you have spells that are really good, like Immobilize and Cloud Step. Immobilize is fantastic because it works on bosses. Just basically briefly lock them in place, stunning them, and allow you to beat the crap out of them. So increasing duration and increasing damage is very helpful at the beginning of the game and throughout the entirety of the game. Cloud Step acts like a mobility tool, so increasing the duration while you're inside of Cloud Step, it's kind of like a stealthy thing, and you want to use this to peel away or close the gap. Both of those use mana, more on that later. So here are a couple of my favorite skills to unlock early on. Smash stance, I'd highly recommend Force Unbound, which enables charging the staff while sprinting, so you can charge heavy attacks and still maintain mobility. Ironbound Resolve, increased defense, basically damage reduction upon landing a heavy attack. And Smashing Focus, increase the damage caused by a charged heavy attack in smash stance. Switching over to Foundation, the stamina tree. I can't say the word, something agility. It reduces stamina's cost upon dodging. Don't make fun of me, I can barely read, that's why I'm on YouTube. Basically, it allows more dodging, it's very helpful. And then Endurance, reduce stamina cost of sprinting. The initial dodge, more agile and flexible, giving you a little bit more mobility. And there's a ton more, but this will give you a good idea of what to take early and why. You can check my website out, Deltiasgaming.com. Shout out, links in the description below to a couple builds to give you a little bit more insight. Moving along, Keeper Shrine. So So this serves as your primary means to fully restore health, kind of like your base. It replenishes your gourd, which is your healing mechanic. It also triggers enemies to respawn. So there's a progression system with the Keeper Shrine, and as you progress and play the game, it will upgrade and unfold. Here's some of the things you can do there. You can rest, you can fast travel there, you can go to self-advancement. So this is where you actually swap spells in and out depending on what you want to use. You can respec your talents for free, and you can upgrade spirits. Also, you can craft, so create and upgrade weapons and armor, brew, replenish your drinks, and add soaks, which are passive bonuses, store, buy, and sell items for will, which is the currency in game, and make medicines, which are kind of like long-term buffs that you're going to use. The Keeper Shrines also is where you go when you die. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you a lot, but there's no penalty for death. So it incentivizes you to try those hard bosses and keep retrying them without fear of losing progression and or regression. Next up is a user interface, and there's a lot going on in the user interface. Now, when you very first start, yours isn't going to look like this until you get some of those things unlocked, but this is where you want to focus your attention on and why. So we have spells. 3 of the spells working left to right use mana, the blue resource on the bottom left of your screen, while the far right is transformation. Changes your appearance and how combat style works, and of course it has another resource mechanic called might. Focus. So we've talked about this, but this is gained through hits, charging up those heavy attacks, perfect dodge, and so on. You can spend them for a heavy attack dealing more damage depending on how many focus points you spend. Stances. This will have smash, pillar, and thrust once you unlock them, and it basically changes how your heavy attack works along with your talents. You can seamlessly swap, and the icon indicates which one you're on. Health, mana, and stamina in the bottom left. You have Spirit, which is a unique ability that costs chi, and it's like a limited time attack burst. Vessel, which is another special equipment, also gives you a bonus for a short duration and uses chi as its resource. Gourd, which is your healing tool with soaks that add bonuses, and you even have more like consumables / items that you can use. So how you want to focus your attention is obvious on the boss, but you're going to work left to right typically is how you play in combat. So stamina, you need to be cognizant of what it costs for you to take 1 dodge. The reason why is you're going to want to leave a little bit in the tank always for an emergency dodge. And if you don't have enough to dodge, you want to use Cloud Step. Those 2 mechanics are your create space tools. So you're looking the bottom left and making sure you have enough to attack and or dodge to get some space and regenerate that stamina. Obviously, health is important, and mana. Mana is also important because you're going to be using Immobilize and Cloud Step frequently. So you want to know how much mana those cost, not just on the tooltip, but what it actually looks like on the bar. So when you go to use it, you know you have a little bit in the tank when it comes off cooldown, and so you can panic CC and control that boss if you get in trouble. Now, the next spot you want your eyes and attention to move towards in combat is your bottom right, so your focus attack. Looking at those little dots as you build them up to see, okay, when is an opportune time to unload a big heavy attack? Also with the current stance that you're in, and then those 2 short-term unique abilities, Spirit and Vessel. Your transformation, you can or cannot use this frequently depending on your playstyle. Sometimes it can be clunky, sometimes it can be awesome to flip it and change out how your light and heavy attack work. So experiment with those 2. So use that attention and kind of look around and pan your vision while you have breaks in the action. Okay, we've talked about stances already, but just in case you skipped that, how dare you? Your stance determines how your heavy attack works essentially in charging in general combat gameplay. There are 3 stances, okay? So smash at level 1, this is kind of your mobility one. Pillar, which changes your heavy attack to kind of lob you up in the air. This is very helpful for defensive gameplay, especially when bosses and mechanics are only ground-based. You can basically cheese a lot of fights using Pillar. And then Thrust. Thrust gives you a little bit more range with your heavy attack, but it sacrifices the mobility for Smash. So early on, it makes sense to have a heavy investment into Smash until you higher in levels 70, 80, where you can start experimenting with the other stances. Ideally, as a beginner, you want to spend just like 1 spark just to unlock Pillar and Thrust so you have a little bit more versatility in your combat performance, and maybe take some of the early talents, but primarily focus on Smash until you get the hang of that combat style and start getting more talents. So heavy attacks, I've talked about these a bit, but these are kind of like the core mechanic in combat, so they can be used in a couple of different ways. First, you can hold a heavy attack using the Smash stance, or any stance for that matter. What it does is it manually builds focus. So if you have no focus due to not hitting anything, or you just fired up the game, you can just kind of build it, walk up to someone in Smash Dance and unload and just boom, boop them. Now the issue with that is though that you're going to have a long-winded animation. So it's not always best to charge up and Rambo in, because likely an enemy is going to attack you straight away. That's where you can charge and do a couple other things like immobilize and build that focus organically. A second way to use heavy attacks is through varied combos. This is kind of a light attack into a heavy attack combo. combo. And you can do it a couple of variety of different ways. And when you use that heavy attack, it's going to use those focus points for your total and your damage. Meaning, you have 4 focus points and you have that maxed out and you combo it into a heavy attack, you're going to boop something very hard. So the entire goal of your combat essentially revolves around generating focus by not losing it, getting hit, and you're doing damage as well. Holding the charge down when you have a free moment, and then releasing the heavy attack when possible, either through the charge mechanic or through the combo mechanic, and building that focus up to 4 points with your talents and passives right away to optimize your overall damage. Moving on, let's talk about the Gourd. So this is your reusable drink that heals based on your maximum HP every sip. The pre-order bonus comes with kind of like an OP one that gives you full health on your first sip. So they have a variety of different mechanics with them and you can upgrade them. The user interface kind of shows you draining a cup as you drink it, but this is your primary mechanism to heal. You can also heal by just going to a shrine, but remember it does reset the enemies in the area. So as stated, it has a progression system and you have soaks is what it's called. You want to tailor your soaks, the passive bonus that you get, towards your specific build. Burst healing, healing over time, additional elements, I mean all sorts of different stuff here. The most important aspect of your Gourd early on is that it can absorb spirits but has to be upgraded. So when you kill a boss, you're going to get something that pops up that says, hey, we can't absorb this spirit without guidance. You need to obtain the Blessed in the Bamboo Grove as you progress through the game. So you're going to beat this boss that rewards you with the Grey Wolf Mask. I can't pronounce the name because, you know, English. We're in return to the Old Wise Man in the Bamboo Grove to complete the upgrade. And then that will allow you to absorb spirits. So spirits are another component to your build if it's not complex enough. It adds an active skill with a passive bonus when equipped. And you're going to see this a lot in the game is this active and passive bonus. So the more you stack active and passives to kind of complement your build and playstyle, the better it will be. Speaking of that, depending on your reaction time and how good you are, like your old 40-year-old man like me and move slow as molasses, you're probably going to want to emphasize defense and survivability. If you're a sweatlord 14-year-old chugging down Mountain Dew every 30 seconds, you're probably not going to need a whole lot of stamina, dodging, and so on. So the thing about spirits is what you want to do is upgrade that Gourd and you're going to start collecting them. It's going to use the resource Chi, which we've talked about a little bit earlier. And essentially what it's going to let you do is like a burst damage mechanic. And there's a ton to collect. The Wandering Wit is extremely good at almost any level, any build. It has a great passive bonus, and then it's also going to allow you to like stun enemies. So you compare the Wandering Wit with the mobilization and kind of chain them back to back for potentially a couple different stuns, especially on bosses, allowing you to do free damage. So that's one you're going to want to target pretty early on. Next up is transformations. They're unique form. So basically you beat bosses and you can like take some of their equipment and allows you to transform into them briefly. It uses yet another mechanic called might, resource I should say, and your light and heavy attacks along with your combos essentially change. So like spirits, these are kind of meant to give you a burst or some form of utility that you need in a pinch in a fight and not to be used as your primary mechanism in combat. So when you have a full might bar, you can activate this, turn in and transform, and then use whatever you want to do damage, survivability, and so on. You can automatically turn it off by switching it off manually, or it will turn off automatically when you run out of the might. Okay, next up is Vessels. Vessels? I can't pronounce it. You'll kill me in the comments anyways. Whatever. These things are special equipment that give temporary boost in combat and also have passive bonus. So the Fireproof Mantle is, you know, the pay-to-win one I think that you get for pre-ordering the game. When you activate it, it gives you burn immunity and gradually increases focus. Passively, it gives you burn resistance. So what are nice about these is just a passive bonus, but you can activate them specifically for encounters that require burn or some other elemental effect. Be aware they do use the Chi resource, so depending on how much you have, you may not want to use these a whole bunch and just kind of leave them on for the passive bonus and rely on your spirits. Okay, so combat. What you need to know about combat is dodging, spells, and I think heavy attacks. I've beaten that to death. We'll touch on dodging and spells. So dodging, you can do, well, a normal dodge using stamina or a perfect dodge. So dodging using stamina, and you want to maintain and not be a button smasher like me, spamming it over and over because you're panicking, your heart's racing, and you're a noob and have no idea what you're doing. What you want to do is timely dodge, and angle yourself while strafing backward. So there's various different talents in the stamina tree that can reduce the stamina cost and or recovery. Dodging, sprinting, and cloud step. These are the 3 basic ways to avoid incoming damage, with 2 of them using stamina, 1 using mana. The benefit of dodge is you can use a perfect dodge by perfectly timing the dodge just as the enemy makes the attack. If you get a perfect dodge, you will jump out of the way and kind of like a shadowy blur of your character will remain. There's many talents that essentially aid you in perfect dodging or give you more damage and or more focus. So spells use mana, limited duration, and they go on cooldown when you use them. Depending on the spell, it can cost a ton of mana and or have a very long cooldown. Immobilize and cloud step are the 2 noob-friendly basics that you gotta use. Mobilize to lock down an enemy, cloud step to get out of dodge or to close the distance. Heavy attacks, we've talked about this, but in summary, your goal is to build focus and use heavy attacks with combos or charging them for the optimal damage. Next up, briefly touching on weapons and armor. There's a lot, I'm kind of exhausted already. You can acquire weapon and armor by beating specific bosses and through crafting, so it's not really complicated how you get armor and weapons. Moreover, it's not very complicated on which ones you should pick. It's pretty obvious as you progress. So weapons have like an attack stat, and they also have a unique effect, some of them. Armor has a set bonus, defense, other stats, and it has a unique effect, usually coming in the headpiece. Most armor are coming in sets, so 2, 3, or 4 piece. You can mix and match if you want 2 pieces, but typically the game incentivizes you to use a 4 piece. Unlike other, with weapons and armor, make sure you're equipping 4 pieces if you have them available. It's pretty obvious which ones you should use, but go touch on the crafting after you've beaten a boss, because likely you're going to get the crafting material that you need to upgrade that armor or weapon after you kill a boss versus just getting it yourself. Next up is another component of builds and progression, that's relics. These are additional elements that provide you yet another passive bonus. You can swap these out on the fly, and you can attain your first one, I think at the end of chapter 1, Craving Eye. This is really good because it has what's called Opportune Watcher passive. It's going to increase your focus gain from light attack. So experiment with them, but what you're kind of realizing through this walkthrough, if you haven't clicked off yet, and you shouldn't, is that a lot of things give you passive bonus, and even the beginning stuff is really, really good at the end game. So don't freak out besides weapon and armor, changing those out. Like you have to change everything out all the time. Even beginning passives, relics, and so on are very good. As you become more and more proficient with combat, it's going to be obvious you can take the training wheel off and start dealing more damage. It just depends on your reflexes and how good you are at the game. I'm not ashamed to say I'm garbage at the game. So I put the training wheels on, you know, those big ones, or if you go to a bowling alley and you got bumpers, that's me. But you can start taking them off as you get better, or like me, just leave them on. All right, enough with the crappy jokes. Let's talk about what you need to focus on in terms of progression. So progression in Black Myth is broken up into a few different things. You're gonna level up. There's a gazillion levels that you can get. Each one of them are gonna give you a spark. The sparks are used to increase your talents. You can get leveling or meditations to get these sparks, but generally at least 1 per level as you go. So talents and skills, there's a gazillion of them. 4 spell trees, stance, and foundation. At early on in the game, don't overcomplicate things. Take the passives, increase your stance in your focus ones so you get more focus attack early on, and then a couple spells. The transformation ones are okay, but you can almost entirely skip min-maxing those if you want. Gourds, these are the ones that heal you. You can have passive benefits, swap them in and out, and you can upgrade them. You're gonna need to prioritize upgrading it initially so you can get spirits and start using those. Spirits, they use chi. It's another resource you're gonna have to manage. Passive bonus along with an active bonus. You're gonna wanna use this to complement your build, specifically the early one that can stun. Very helpful. Transformation, it's gonna use might as your resource. It's your 4th spell. You don't need a lot of talents to make these powerful and impactful, but change in briefly when you're in a pinch. Stance, 3 stances. Ideally focus on that smash stance and upgrading that to start. As you learn and become more advanced, take at least 1 or 2 skills in pillar and thrust just to unlock it, and maybe an early skill that helps you along the way. Relics, another passive bonus which you can change at any time, and curios, 2 or more, well, passive bonuses. So there are a lot of passives, not a whole lot of actives. The game is really about passively optimizing your build, but I will say things that you obtain at the very beginning of the game can be very powerful later on. So don't overthink things. Take the passives that increase your max health, your max stamina, stamina recovery, lower dodge costs. Focus on upgrading those weapons and armor, and have fun. Take time to explore. There's no maps. You can't get carried by map.com or whatever finding out where to go. And you can do a bunch of secret bosses, and everything's rewarding. There's no punishment for dying. So get out of your comfort zone, die a few times, trying one of those big nasty bosses, and come to Deltiasgaming.com when you need guides. All right, enough plugs. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Okay, maybe one more plug. Check the description below. Thanks. Bye.